Have you ever noticed that often the biggest barrier between you and the life you desire isn't the circumstances, but the doubts you carry within? After all, we're taught to believe only in what we can see or explain. But what happens when the reality before your eyes insists there's no way out? Could it be that this is precisely where the opportunity lies to experience something far greater than human logic can predict? How many times have you wondered if you're truly capable of overcoming a situation that seemed impossible? Perhaps you've looked at your family, your health, or your finances and felt like you were at a dead end. The truth is, we've all faced moments like these. And it's at this exact point that the difference emerges between living in limitation or opening yourself to a new reality, guided not by insecurity, but by a faith that moves mountains. Today, you'll not only understand why you should never doubt God's power, but also discover how to adopt a mindset that transforms impossibilities into victories. Every story, every teaching, and every example you hear will be an invitation to see beyond the obvious, embrace your identity as a chosen one, and experience in practice a life where miracles aren't exceptions, but natural responses from a God who honors the faith of those who don't doubt. There are moments in life when logic screams, "It won't work out," and that's where the true test of faith is revealed. In those moments, you must shield your heart against pessimism and cultivate a mind that doesn't waver. Having a doubt-free mindset doesn't mean ignoring the facts, but believing that God is greater than them. Imagine someone who loses their job and, instead of giving in to fear, chooses to trust that an even better door will open. That attitude is the first step toward living miracles. Staying firm in positive thoughts isn't easy because circumstances often push against you. Yet, when your mind is anchored in faith, the impossible begins to take shape as a possibility. People who choose to think this way carry an invisible strength that sustains them even when everything seems about to collapse. It's like holding onto a rope in the middle of a storm. No matter how strong the wind, you know you're not alone. Doubt weakens, but trust strengthens. When you choose to believe that God can reverse diagnoses, restore marriages, or open new paths, something shifts within you. It's not just about waiting, but waiting with the certainty that the answer will come. It's in that space between "there's no way" and "it will happen" that miracles find room to be born. Adopting this mindset requires daily discipline. It might mean swapping music that feeds sadness for songs that inspire hope, or replacing phrases like "I can't" with "I will, because I'm not alone." Every word you choose is a seed planted in the garden of your mind. And like any garden, what you cultivate is what blooms. This state of trust also changes how you face small challenges. From waiting for a response in a job interview to dealing with an unexpected debt, those who stand firm in faith learn not to despair, but to take a deep breath and trust. This isn't naivety. It's the wisdom of someone who recognizes a greater power guiding their steps. When this understanding takes hold, your perspective on life changes completely. Doubt no longer rules. Trust in a God who never fails does. That's when ancient stories stop being just narratives and become inspiration for the present, naturally leading you to reflect on the extraordinary deeds He has already accomplished. When someone questions whether the impossible still happens, they need only look at the stories recorded in Scripture. God has always shown Himself capable of transforming reality into something unimaginable. It was He who stopped the sun in the sky so Joshua could win the battle. Who would have dared to believe in that without a faith that knows no limits? These passages aren't myths. They're living testimonies that the same power remains active today. The Red Sea parting before Moses is another undeniable proof. Picture the scene: a cornered people with no way out, and suddenly the sea becomes a road. That's the signature of a God who acts beyond logic. How many times do we feel cornered, unable to see a way out? It's in those moments that remembering this miracle brings courage. If He parted the sea, He can also open a path through the chaos of modern life. The young men in the fiery furnace survived without even the smell of smoke. Paul and Silas, unjustly imprisoned, saw their chains break as they praised. These accounts aren't just distant memories. but reminders that no matter how hot the furnace or how strong the chains seem, God's presence makes everything tremble. What about Lazarus? 4 days buried, with no human hope left, yet called back to life. This miracle echoes today, showing that not even death is a barrier for those who place their trust in the author of life. It's as if every detail of the story is an invitation to believe that nothing is lost, even when the diagnosis or verdict has already been given. Even Gideon, insecure and full of doubts, was strengthened and led a small army to victory against thousands. This teaches us that it's not about human strength, but about the strength that comes from above. A student, for example, who feels incapable of passing a tough exam can remember Gideon and trust that they don't need to be the strongest, only the most confident in their faith. These examples aren't in the past by chance. They're signs that the same power continues to act today, ready to intervene in the lives of those who believe. If yesterday God did the impossible before nations and kings, why would he stop acting on behalf of his children today? The memory of these miracles opens the door to seeing your own story in a new light, preparing your heart for experiences as remarkable as those recorded in the Bible. Taking on a role you don't feel prepared for can be one of the greatest tests of courage. Many people have faced the responsibility of leading or making critical decisions in moments of vulnerability. Within them, everything screamed insecurity, but something deeper spoke louder: trust in God's power. And that choice made all the difference. When the inner voice says, "I'm not capable," faith responds, "But he is." It's common to feel like someone without the tools for the task. We often believe success depends solely on human abilities, but the truth is, it's precisely when we are weak that divine power manifests most clearly. It's like a student who, with no resources, earns a coveted scholarship because they chose not to give up, but to trust they were supported. This reflection shows that you don't need all the answers. You just need to be willing to take the next step. It's not the perfect resume or vast experience that always determines the path, but the willingness to trust. And it's curious how God chooses the unlikely to show that his strength isn't limited by human ability. He takes a simple vessel and transforms it into something extraordinary. When this dependence is cultivated, the journey takes on a new flavor. Victories cease to be just personal achievements and become living testimonies of divine action. How many times have you experienced something and thought, "This couldn't have happened without a greater hand guiding me"? That's the sign that we don't walk alone, even when the road seems deserted. True leadership doesn't stand out because it never doubts itself, but because it never doubts God's power to act through it. This reminds us that the greatest leaders aren't the strongest, but the ones who trust the most. And this trust can be applied to any area: business, family, studies, relationships. This perspective inspires and paves the way to reflect on the opposing voices that try to paralyze us. If so many faced internal and external doubts and still moved forward, why should you believe the lies that try to trap your future? This is where the next point arises: how to deal with those negative voices. There's a silent trap that holds thousands of people captive, believing in phrases that start with never. You'll never be happy again. You'll never recover. You'll never succeed. These words are disguised poisons launched to undermine faith and steal hope. You must confront each one because they don't come from God, but from a voice that tries to reduce the chosen one to less than they are. These lies act like invisible chains. A person begins to live limited, believing more in the negative verdict than in the divine promise. It's like someone who failed in a business and decides never to try again, despite having the talent and creativity to thrive. The never becomes a wall that imprisons when it should just be a stumble on the path. The only way to break this cycle is to replace those voices with greater truths. Instead of saying, "I'll never heal," declare, "Even though it's hard, I trust in a God who restores." Instead of accepting, "I'll never prosper," affirm, "My provision doesn't depend only on the economy but on the hand that opens doors." Each declaration is a conscious choice to believe in faith over fear. This process may seem simple, but it's powerful. Those who choose to replace lies with promises begin to see new possibilities. A person who hears daily that they're worthless can, by remembering they're a child of God, a chosen one, lift their head, and walk with dignity. The heart strengthens, and the mind is set free. These lies also appear in moments of pain. After a loss, it's common to hear that joy will never return. But the truth is, with time and faith, life finds new reasons to flourish. It doesn't mean forgetting the pain, but allowing it to be transformed into strength. And it's precisely this turnaround that shows no lie is final. When someone chooses to silence the voice of never, they make room to hear the voice of hope. This is the path to facing giants, because it's not just about silencing lies, but declaring truths that move mountains. Just like David, who faced a humanly impossible challenge, trust in God will always be greater than any sentence of defeat. Who could imagine that a scrawny boy, armed only with a sling and a few stones, would bring down the most feared warrior of his time? The scene is almost cinematic. On one side, David, young and inexperienced. On the other, Goliath, a giant trained to kill. Yet the victory didn't come from physical strength, but from unwavering faith in God. This shows us that when we trust in Him, disadvantages turn into advantages. David didn't enter the battlefield with the same armor as the soldiers, but he entered with something far greater, the certainty that he wasn't alone. He declared he came in the name of the Lord, and that conviction changed the course of history. How many times do we face situations that seem like Goliath in our lives? Unpayable debts, impossible diagnoses, family crises. It's exactly in these moments that David's example invites us to face them without fear. The strength of his victory wasn't in defeating the giant with perfection, but in refusing to believe it was impossible. He dared to trust when everyone around him doubted. This is inspiring because it shows that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Each of us carries pebbles in our bag, skills, gifts, and opportunities that, when used with faith, can bring down giants. What many don't realize is that Goliath has fallen countless times since that scene. He continues to exist in different forms: rejections, failures, insecurities. But the strategy remains the same. Don't face him with logic, but with trust in God. The giant isn't bigger than the promise. And when this perspective takes root in the heart, victory stops being unlikely and becomes inevitable. This reveals that one person's victory can transform an entire nation. David didn't just win, he freed Israel from the fear that paralyzed them. This reminds us that our courage inspires others to believe. When someone chooses not to doubt and conquers, they pave the way for others to believe it's possible. Faith is contagious. It spreads hope. And just as David turned an impossible battle into victory, modern stories continue to echo this same power. These are lives that defied predictions and showed that, for those who trust in God, there's no final sentence. One such real story is even more striking, as it surpasses the limits of science and reveals tangible miracles. Many people have been born with or received heavy diagnoses at some point in their lives. Words like never and impossible hit like hammers, striking not only the heart of the person receiving them but also their entire family. Still, there are those who choose not to bow to despair and decide to stand firm in faith. And it's precisely this choice that opens the door to the unexpected. Against all human predictions, stories of overcoming blossom. Those who were never supposed to walk take their first steps. Those who wouldn't have a normal life go on to sing, study, and achieve dreams. Each achievement becomes living proof that God isn't bound by diagnoses or statistics. What seemed like an absolute limit is toppled by trust in the impossible. But this doesn't mean an absence of challenges. There are setbacks, pain, and even times when everything seems to regress. Yet faith persists in declaring trust in God, even when the body or circumstances say otherwise. This stance teaches us something profound. Faith isn't denying reality, but believing it can be transformed. It's lifting your eyes beyond what's in front of you. These journeys also remind us that miracles aren't for spectacle, but for edification. Each victory inspires not only the one who experiences it, but also those facing relentless diagnoses or dead-end situations. This creates a chain of hope, because if God did it in someone's life, He can do it in anyone's life who trusts in Him. When you know the full story, it's impossible not to be moved. It's not just about surviving, but about flourishing, building paths, starting families, and proving that the final word never belongs solely to science or statistics. What seemed like the end becomes a new beginning, because faith insists on enduring. Thus, these testimonies echo as powerful reminders. Human limitations don't define divine action. God continues to change destinies, surprise experts, break sentences, and write stories that defy logic. And this leads us to reflect that if He can do this in one life, He can also radically transform the course of our own journey. Imagine driving on a congested highway and suddenly realizing police cars are clearing the way ahead of you. Everything changes. The traffic laws that once limited your progress now give way to a greater authority escorting you. This example shows that when God is with us, it's exactly like that. The impossible gives way to the possible because we're not traveling alone. It's striking to think how often we face life as if we have to fight everything with our own strength. But if the Creator of the universe is in the same car as us, then why doubt? Faith reminds us that He isn't subject to the laws of economics, science, or human circumstances. He rules above them. This truth brings peace in moments of pressure. Those who've faced piling bills know how despair can knock at the door. Yet when we remember we have a divine escort, we can maintain serenity. It's like a business owner who, seeing their company on the brink of bankruptcy, chooses not to give in to fear, but to trust in solutions yet to be revealed. There's also something liberating in this metaphor. We don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just as the escorted car doesn't need to explain why it can move forward, we don't need to justify every step when we're being guided by God. He opens space where there was only blockage. Trust in Him replaces anxiety with rest. That's why we must remind ourselves daily of who is by our side. This awareness changes how we speak, think, and act. The future stops being a burden because we know it doesn't depend solely on us. It's walking with the conviction that the road has already been prepared, even if we can't yet see the destination. And reflecting on this reality leads us to understand that no lack or scarcity can limit divine action. After all, when He decides to intervene, even the wind changes direction to fulfill His purpose. This lesson becomes even clearer when we remember the surprising provision He sent to the people in the desert. Moses had just heard the complaints of a hungry people in the desert, and his human mind couldn't imagine a solution. Will God provide meat for all these people, he thought. But the answer came unexpectedly. A massive flock of quail, enough to feed the entire multitude. The scene is one of the greatest proofs that when human resources run out, the supernatural manifests. This episode reveals that you don't need to calculate how the miracle will come, only believe that it will. Moses saw only the desert, with no livestock, no possibilities. But God already had a plan to change the wind and bring provision. How many times do we look at our own situations and conclude there's no way out? This account challenges us to stop calculating and start trusting. The people in that moment didn't need logic but hope. And that's exactly what they received, meat in abundance from the sky by divine breath. This teaches us that God's power isn't limited to meeting just the basics, but can bring abundance where there was only scarcity. He doesn't just solve problems, He transforms them into grand testimonies. This story also shows the fragility of our faith under pressure. Moses, even after witnessing so many miracles, still doubted. This reminds us that it's normal to feel weak, but we shouldn't stay there. Doubt may appear, but it shouldn't linger. After all, God's greatness always surpasses our limitations. In practice, this lesson can be applied to everyday situations. Those who look at an empty table can believe there will be food tomorrow. Those facing a closed door at work can trust a new opportunity will open. The wind that brought quail yesterday can bring creative and unexpected solutions today. When we remember this episode, we understand that provision was never in our hands but always in God's. This prepares us to face life with confidence, certain that abundance can arrive at any moment, unexpectedly. And this certainty paves the way for a life marked not by doubt, but by constant faith in divine action. There's nothing more transformative than living with the conviction that God can change any situation. When doubt stops being the guide, life gains a new horizon. It's as if your eyes begin to see possibilities hidden behind impossibilities. The heart, once heavy, finds lightness because it no longer carries the weight of uncertainties alone. Trust in Him becomes the fuel to move forward. This lifestyle doesn't eliminate problems, but completely changes how you face them. A tough diagnosis may come, a crisis may knock at the door, but those who choose not to doubt enter these battles with a different posture. They don't despair because they know the final word doesn't belong to circumstances, but to a God who rules above them. Every step taken in faith is a silent declaration. I know whom I trust. It's this trust that makes room for the extraordinary to happen. When the heart refuses to yield to unbelief, the impossible loses its power. Life becomes marked by testimonies of overcoming, not stories of giving up. This is the legacy of those who choose to live in the certainty of the promise. Often what's lacking isn't resources or opportunities, but the decision to believe. Doubt paralyzes, but faith moves. The difference between someone who gives up and someone who conquers lies in their willingness to cling to divine power. And by doing so, they not only achieve personal victory, but also inspire everyone around them to believe. This path requires practice. It's choosing every day to feed faith with words of hope, memories of miracles already lived, and declarations that reinforce trust. It's not automatic, but a constant exercise. And each time this choice is made, faith grows, the mind strengthens, and the heart prepares for new miracles. In the end, living without doubt isn't just a spiritual recommendation, but a lifestyle that opens doors, topples giants, changes diagnoses, and writes new stories. It's the call to walk as a chosen one, knowing that with faith the impossible ceases to be a threat and becomes a stage for the manifestation of God's power. To show you've made it this far, comment below this video with the keyword trust, and share this content with someone who also needs to be reminded of God's power in their life. I want to hear from you. In what area have you seen faith turn the impossible into victory? Share your testimony in the comments. It could be the answer someone needs today. And before you go, click on the video that appears on your screen now to continue this journey of self-discovery and spiritual strengthening.